Welcome to another podcast episode with Kirstie Wulf, a visionary building designer and certified passive house expert. As the founder of Shelter Building Design, Kirstie's passion lies in creating sustainable, eco-friendly spaces. With an unwavering enthusiasm for hemp construction, she is paving the way for a greener future, one innovative project at a time. Join us as we explore Kirstie's remarkable journey and the transformative power of sustainable architecture.
Welcome to the podcast today. Today we've got a special guest, Kirstie. So if Kirstie, you want to do a bit of introduction and tell people about yourself and give us a bit of a rundown. What do you do?
Hi, yes, so I'm a building designer. I work for my own business, which is Shelter Building Design. I've been doing that for almost 10 years now, and I specialise in natural building materials, particularly hempcrete, but I've also done quite a lot of other ones like straw bale, light earth, earth bag, those types of things. I'm also a passive house certified designer, and I have my first hempcrete passive house currently under construction in Sydney, and also do quite a lot of work in high bushfire areas and work with a lot of people who are obviously off-grid.
Exciting. Yeah, I'm very excited, like I said, to have a chat with you because it's what I find, there's a lot of passive house consultants I've talked to. They've got a way that they want to build houses, and I think I would love. Have you ever put a blower door test on a hemp house, or have you ever put a blower door test on any of your sustainable houses you've built?
Not yet, but obviously with them being certified passive house, I will. So the first hemp place I did was my own house, and that's sort of how I got into it. So on the south coast of New South Wales, I built my hempcrete house. That was started in 2012 and finished in 2014. So at that time, hemp building was quite early in Australia. I'd say we're probably one of the first 5 houses built in Australia. But that house, in terms of its functionality, we have no heating and no cooling, and it stays comfortable all year round.
Exciting. So I suppose just to explain to people that are listening, what is a blower door test? Do you want to explain to people what that test is for the passive house design?
So in terms of blower door test, what they're looking at is they're looking at the air tightness of a house. So most houses in Australia aren't airtight at all. So whatever heating and cooling we are doing, we are losing it through all the cracks and gaps and those sorts of things, with in winter cold air coming in, or in summer your cool air going out. So the idea behind sort of air tightness is that it's one of a number of strategies to increase the efficiency of your house by stopping all this heat transfer inside and out from those cracks and gaps. So a blower door test is basically they will close up all of the windows, seal up all of the doors, and in one of the doors they'll put a blower door sort of unit, and it will either pressurise or depressurize the house and work out how many air changes per hour are going through the house. So most Australian houses are pretty shocking, somewhere about probably around 12 air changes an hour. So obviously working to improve that. The passive house standard, it is got to get down to 0.6 of an air change per hour. So obviously a huge difference there. In terms of health though, once you start sealing houses up, you need to start looking at how are you going to get fresh air into the house, because once you get below about 3 air changes per hour, for health reasons, you need to introduce some sort of ventilation, and the most efficient way to do that is via mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, because what that means is that whatever the temperature, and when I say heat, it can be hot or cold, depending whether it's summer or winter, you have in your house, it will strip that out of the outgoing air and add that to the incoming air to keep that whatever temperature you have in your house even. So there we go.
Yep. No, thank you. Yeah, it's I'm excited. I really can't wait to see your the results from your hemp house, because I think with a lot of the inefficiencies with building, it's the thermal bridges and putting everything together is where all the problems come from in hemp. You know, you've got your formwork, you pack it in, and a lot of that a lot of the things from traditional building just gone, from building with hemp and rammed earth and things like that.
Yeah, so one of the things is actually I came into sort of looking at passive house from a background of natural building materials and working with hemp in particular. And from the way I was looking at things, hemp sort of lends itself quite naturally to a much more airtight building. Because the hemp is cast on site, what it means is that you obviously from the start, the way the building material goes together, we're reducing a lot of those cracks and gaps to begin with. So I actually went in to study passive house design on the basis of trying to sort of say, look, we need to be able to do our natural building materials better. And I think that these natural building materials actually can perform as well or even better than a lot of these sort of petrochemical based insulation materials that they're using to get the high insulation values they require for passive house.
Yep. No, definitely. So how did you get into the industry? Like, yeah, when did it all start?
Interestingly, about probably 22 years ago, I sort of, a builder, I was sort of involved a little bit in my first house, which is a mud brick house in the Blue Mountains. So at that point in time, my building knowledge was quite minimal. And it was a pretty steep sort of learning curve. Most of it did pretty well, put all the windows on the north side. So we had a good start there, but obviously could have done a little bit better. So that sort of really, once just going through that process made me realise that I really liked building. You know, it was kind of like going back to being a kid and building cubby houses, which is one of my great sort of things that kept me busy for days as a child. So I was sort of involved in that. But at the time, I was actually working as a lawyer and continued doing that for quite a few more years. I did study building design, but then had a child, so that sort of made it easy to go back to lawyering rather than start a new career. But I started building my hempcrete house on the south coast, and I did that as owner builder, so I did a lot of work in that. And it was through that process that I really sort of felt that my sort of passion was building design and that I had to do it. So I did some further qualifications and started my own business.
Awesome. Very exciting. I just actually might share your website here. And you had a few different builds here. So do you want to explain the differences, with the hemp, mud brick, light earth house? Like, what's the meaning behind them?
Okay, so basically they're all referring to, and it's interesting that the only difference is really the wall material. So people often sort of refer things to as a hemp house or a mud brick house, but really it's just got walls. The rest of the house is all sort of can be quite sort of similar. In terms of that, so mud brick is a very ancient sort of way of building, whereby a clay-rich soil is formed into bricks and usually just sort of dried in the sun. Very low embodied energy, really easy to sort of use if you have the right type of soil. You can dig that subsoil from your site. Mud brick can be a little bit labour intensive, but really sort of versatile building material. Although a builder did build my mud brick house 22 years ago, I did my own mud brick shed, which taught me actually how heavy mud bricks are. So in terms of that, mud brick is a high thermal mass material. In other words, it will take a while to heat up and a while to cool down, but it will hold that temperature. So it's a good choice where you have a high diurnal sort of change in temperature. So hot in the day and cold at night, it can really act to sort of even that out. However, in climates where you have like a long string of really cold days or a lot of heat where it doesn't cool down at night, that thermal mass can actually sort of act against you. And in really cold climates, it doesn't really give you enough insulation. And so that was why when I actually built my next place, which is on the south coast, I was looking at doing hempcrete. The reason that I chose the hempcrete was, as an owner builder, it was easier for me to do. Part of the reason for that is that there's a standard timber frame inside the hempcrete. So as a bit of a novice, I was relieved to know that, the house wasn't going to fall down. The other thing is I investigated the insulation values, and that was one of the downsides of my mud brick house, was that it just didn't get warm enough in winter. We did have to use artificial heating. So nice and cool in summer, but not quite warm enough in winter. So I looked at the hempcrete on the basis that it was going to be much better in terms of insulation, but also in terms of vapor permeability. So that's one of the great things about lots of natural building materials, is that the walls are vapor permeable. And people often sort of say that the walls are breathable. Air is not going through there, but water vapor is, because the water vapor is smaller. Why is that important? Because having an even indoor humidity level is really important for our health, to reduce mold. And so by having a vapor permeable building material, it really provides both even temperature and even humidity. So that was kind of my reasoning behind the hempcrete. Looking at also light earth. Light earth is a great choice for high performing natural building material. It is a little bit like hempcrete in the sense that there is a standard frame which is your structural support. And instead of in hempcrete, it's hemp and lime, which is the infill. In light earth, it's straw and clay. So unlike cob, which is also straw and clay, but cob is mostly clay with a bit of straw, light earth is mostly straw with a bit of clay. And so the clay just sort of acts as a binder.
Yeah, cool. So I think I was just trying to find a photo of you. So I thought I saw a photo of you doing a straw bale house. Was correct?
As a building designer, I was designing a straw bale house, and took myself along to a workshop building a straw bale house. So I've actually just done sort of volunteer work on a number of straw bale houses. And for me as a designer, I feel like understanding how the materials go together and what all the pieces involved, all the steps involved are, it helps you understand how you can design them so that they're easy to build.
Yeah.
And sort of also assisting sort of owner builders who are then doing that sort of work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for myself, when I first got in the solar industry, that was, I suppose, for me, it was a logical thing to do. That I wanted to sell solar systems. I went and worked for a year doing installations and learning how to do the installs and all the ins and out of it, and how it all worked. And I think there's a lot of people these days that just don't do that stuff and just want to sell it, or they don't really live it or understand it. So I can see how valuable that is, going out and building.
I think that having had the experience of building my own house, sort of like from woe to go, it really sort of just helped me understand sort of all the things that owner builders themselves might be facing, and looking at also discussing with people what skills they have in terms of their owner builder journey, what they contract out. I think that whole experience was quite invaluable for me.
Yeah, totally. So would you say what's the benefit of what benefits does a straw bale house bring to a build?
In terms of straw bale, I mean, the great thing about straw bale is it's insulating. And people think that straw bale is really superly high insulating. It's actually not really any better than sort of your rock wool insulation, except that the walls are generally thicker because the straw bales come in sort of dimensions. So if you have them flat, it's 450. If you have them on end, it's 350. And so it's the insulation value of that material combined with the thickness, which gives it its great performance. But one of the wonderful things about straw bale is that just low embodied energy. This is a natural building material that is generally an agricultural waste product. So interestingly though, from a thermal point of view, quite often people will sort of build with the bales on flat, and it's easier because of the location of the strings to actually do them that way. However, the insulation value for your straw bales is actually higher having them on end. So even though on flat they're 450 thick and on end they're 350 thick, the actual insulation value is higher where they're 350 thick because of the way the straws are oriented. So where the straws are parallel to the wall, sort of going through the wall, sort of heat can actually dissipate greater. But when they're sort of perpendicular to that, there's sort of less heat can flow through there. So there we go.
Exciting. That's good to know. I'll keep that one. So, okay, cool. So, it's like probably asking what's your favorite child. So with all the building materials, like, which is your favorite material to build with?
Oh, hempcrete.
Yep.
I mean, okay, part of the reason is, and look, I acknowledge that most of the natural building materials, and in fact, not just for natural building materials, most building materials, they all have pros and cons. There is no one building material out there which is low embodied energy, low carbon, low cost, easy to install, low toxicity. All of them have sort of, pros and cons. So a couple of the reasons why I like the hempcrete is that, look, yes, low carbon, good insulation. It's also got a little bit of thermal mass. So that's really good too. Vapor permeable, easy for owner builders to do themselves. And it's quite sort of variable in terms of you can have a really sharp, modern-looking house with a crisp render, or you can have really curved corners on your windows and a really soft sort of finish. So it can be quite malleable in terms of the actual sort of finish that you're going to get from that material. In terms of the downsides of the hempcrete are that from when I first built my house, the materials were a little bit cheaper. Things have gone up, prices have gone up, but prices have gone up for all building materials. Hopefully, as we grow more hemp in Australia, that might actually bring the price back down. The other downside of the hempcrete is that it does involve using lime, and when it's in its sort of dry state or it's wet, the lime is caustic. So that does mean that you need to sort of wear your rubber gloves and long sleeves while you're building with it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, hemp, to me, I've got a long history with hemp. I've done a few hemp builds, and it's something that we want to build our dream house. As my wife and I have discussed, we want to build a house out of hemp.
That sounds great.
So, it's my favorite child. So is there any other downsides with like building? Is there anywhere, like for me, when I'm thinking about building my house, I've always said to myself that, depending on the location, I'm going to let whatever's going to be the best situation where we end up buying and building our dream house on, I'm going to let the environment decide what's the best building material to use. With using hemp, do you think is there a bad place to build a hemp house in Australia or anywhere in the world? You can see like a bad location of using it, or?
I don't think it's bad there's something bad in terms of location. Obviously, it's about transport of materials. So depending on where materials are, if you're transporting materials a long distance, then maybe it's not quite so practical. Many years ago, accessing sort of hemp for building was quite difficult. But now they're processing fibre in Western Australia, Victoria. They've just started doing it in South Australia, New South Wales. So, getting a local hemp supply is really helpful. But in terms of location, I think that's actually more about design than the building material. So if you are in a milder location, you might have walls which are, say, 250 millimetres thick. But if you're in a colder climate, you might then increase the thickness of your walls to 300 millimetres to get better insulation.
Yeah, okay, great. So can you see any other downsides like to using hemp?
Is this a trick question? No, as I said, I think, look, I would like the cost to come down just so that it's more competitive in the market. At the moment, there's probably a small cost premium to build with hemp. When I built my house on the South Coast, I actually did a comparison at that point in time about the cost of building with hempcrete as opposed to cost with building other building materials.
Yep.
And at that time, it came in about comparable to brick veneer. So less expensive than double brick, but more expensive than a clad house.
Yeah.
So the thing is you have to look at, though, is not just looking at what is the cost of my building, but what is the overall cost of this in terms of running costs as well. So even if there is now a small premium to be building with hempcrete, I would sort of say it's still worth it, because what it means is that over the life of your building, you're going to have less heating and cooling costs and less ongoing sort of running costs. And the other thing is occupant health. It's a hard price to put on, good health.
Yeah, totally. It's one of the things I always tell people, that the best money you will spend when you're designing an off-grid house is the design and the materials that you build with. I've been in such a unique situation over the years, because we get to see at the end of the build is how energy efficient the house is. So that's been one of the big things for me, get to see that. And I've seen like the best money, my customers that have the best experience with their solar systems, they've really, really well designed, really good materials. Like it's an example. We got a couple of places in Jordan, like in the Middle East, we've been involved in, and they use mud brick and straw bale to do the builds over there. And it's funny, they're so cheap, so quick, no air conditionings they do them so fast. And then there's all these other builds going up around, which are traditional builds. They take forever. They cost so much more, and they're all bolt and air conditions everywhere. Where the traditional build, they don't need that. So
I think, though, it needs to be a combination of things. If the building materials alone are not going to work well unless they're combined with good design.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of sort of saying, and part of good design is choosing the building materials, but you need to combine good design with the appropriate choice of building materials, and it's the whole package that sort of works together is what's going to give you a really highly efficient house.
Yeah. Is there any examples you give of where people make mistakes when they're doing their designs? Some simple basic mistakes people don't think about?
Not so much in terms of design, but perhaps in terms of construction. I think most people underestimate, including me, how long and how much work's involved. I remember when I was sort of building, and it's like the roof was on, the walls were up, the windows were in, and someone said to me, "You're only halfway." And they were actually correct, because when you're building, like when those big things are happening, work's happening really fast, things are going up quickly, it's really exciting, you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in a couple of weeks, but it's all the finishing and fit out. And it's important not to sort of overlook those things. They are quite important in terms of the functionality of your house and the longevity of it. But most people, as I said, including me, underestimate how long these things take. In terms of time also, I'd sort of say taking time during the design process is really useful. So sometimes sort of having a design and sort of clients will go away and sort of say, oh, look, at the beginning, they'll be like, I want this house really, really fast. And, how quickly can we get into council? But during the process, suddenly they'll just sort of take a couple of weeks and I won't hear from them. And they'll come back and go, I've had a really careful look at that. And taking that time to sort of think these things through and go, is that really going to work for me? Do I really like that sort of aspect or that sort of thing? Is invaluable, because once you start building, it's much more expensive to change things later. Yeah. It's really cheap and really easy to change things during the design phase. So I would say definitely don't scrimp on the sort of the time and effort put into that design phase.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it's like, so my biggest thing I sort of say to people is like windows and external shading devices. They're the two things I sort of really want to work with customers with and give them education on, because I see a lot of people that don't really respect how good a double glazing window is. And the same thing as well, I've seen so many horror stories, and I lived this horror story myself in Sydney. We had a huge big western wall, 2-story house, big brick wall, and I fixed it with running bamboo. I had all this plan to put. I actually put all the studs on the wall, and I got some cool room panel. And my plan was to, reverse veneer it basically on the brick wall on the western side of the house. And I planted this running bamboo. It was in a little concrete patch, and it just grew up and just solved all my problems. And then, that was what made the house get so hot, and it stopped us from using the air conditioning.
I
And
think you've touched on sort of two different points there. One is the type of windows you have, and that would be both the glazing and the frame. And the other is location and orientation of the windows. I think in Australia, we sort of see all these wonderful houses with just, full walls of glazing, but we've got to think really carefully. Even the most sophisticated, highly insulated glazing is going to be nowhere near as good as a pretty ordinary wall. So we've got to think about when we're using glazing, it's like we are deliberately creating weak points in the house. So number one would be, when you're choosing your type of glazing, I would say absolutely go double glazing. Single glazing is building for the past. If you look at sort of North America and Europe, no one uses single glazing anymore. In Australia, we've got to get up to standard with what's happening sort of elsewhere. So in terms of that, what I often say to my clients is, look, put the best possible windows in that you can afford, because you never change your windows.
Yeah.
How often do people rip their windows out? After 10 or 15 years, people might change their kitchen or update the tiles. They're easy, but people don't change their windows. So particularly if people are starting out in building, I would say definitely put your money into the fabric of the building. These are the things that you want to stay and to not change in your building for the next 100 years or more. So in terms of that, do the best you possibly can. When you are looking at windows, look at the total U value of the windows, not just sort of say double glazing, because I learned the hard way myself as well. At the time, I couldn't afford sort of anything better, but I put not thermally broken aluminium windows, which were double glazed, in my Hemp house. Now, they are definitely the weakest point.
Yeah.
And I actually took a thermal imaging camera down in the middle of winter, and the house inside was coasting along at a lovely toasty sort of 18, 19 degrees, which is not bad without any heating. It was a lovely sort of 5 degrees outside. And when you use the thermal imaging camera, you could actually see that there was more heat being lost through the frames than there were through the double glazing. So number one, it shows double glazing works, but we've also got to think about what is the insulation value of your frames. So that's sort of the choice of the windows. The other one then is the location of the windows. So in terms of that, windows on the north, they're fantastic. And people keep going on and on about north orientation. Why is it so good? Because we understand how the sun works, and we can use eaves or shades to basically get tons of sun in your house in winter when you want it, and block the sun in summer when you don't want it. And it's sort of that really simple ability to have that heat when you want it, exclude it when you don't want it, which makes north glazing just so important. The thing is, though, on the south side, you're almost always just going to be losing heat there. So thinking about sort of where you put your windows, why you're putting them there, I think is another sort of crucial part of good design, and in the end, having a low energy house.
Yep. No, totally. Yeah. We have I'm going to call it a happy little mistake in our house. It's not really happy, but the builder, the quote was double glazed window. My wife paid the deposit saying double glazed window. The window turned up. I looked at it. I was like, is that an air gap in that there? I was like, sort of looks like it. I said to the builder, is that double glazed? And he looked at the invoice, said, yeah, look, double glazed. And I read it said 5 mil gap, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. So it doesn't really look like a double glazed window. Anyway, it got installed. It's not a double glazed window. It's actually a single glazed window. And so they won't remove it. It was just, too much of an effort. So anyway, it's the reason I call it happy little mistake, because it's gold for me to have in my house double glazing window there, single glazing window there, and I can put the thermal imaging camera on it. And I can really see the difference in that room and how much colder it is to the rest of the house.
So it's interesting you should say that, because over 20 years ago, when I got my mud brick house built, double glazing was so much more expensive then. Yeah. Now it's maybe only 25% more expensive. Yeah. Totally worth it now. Yeah. But back then it was not as common. So the more people are using double glazing, it's actually bringing the price down.
Totally.
But I actually put double glazed timber windows on the south side of my house and single glazed elsewhere. So even at that point in time, before I'd done any building design training, I knew that I'd just be losing heat out on that south side. But I do definitely regret not double glazing the whole house.
Whole place, yeah.
Yep.
No, yeah. So, yeah, awesome. So, mate, so with hemp, we'll go back to hemp. So to tell you a bit of a story for us. So when we moved to the Northern Rivers, my plan when I bought this house was to gut it. It was built in the 60s. The whole plan, we ripped all the gyprock off all the walls, and we called a couple of hemp companies, and where we got to was like, the attitude from the guys at the time were like, mate, yep, $300,000. And it's a 145 square meter house. Well, at the time, it was actually only a 95 square meter house. And they was like $300,000. And I was like, you haven't even been to site to have a look at it. I was like, we've got all the form work. I've even got my own pan mixer, which I've moved on since. But yeah, it was a real challenge. And both companies have said, look, we don't take on jobs anything less than $300,000. Wow. I'm talking back 2017, 2018, this would have been trying to get that done. And so, yeah, for us, the cost was just crazy. Like, we could have knocked the house down and done it. And I know, yeah, at the time, there weren't many builders working with hemp at that time, and they could just say whatever they want and people were paying it, and we're also close to Byron Bay. So, sometimes with the cool stuff, you pay Byron Bay prices. So what do you think it is that we need to see in the industry to stop things like that happening and to get more people using the material and building with it?
A couple of things. I think that hempcrete actually is really great for retrofits because it uses a standard sort of timber frame. So you can actually take the wall out and you can retrofit it with hempcrete. Things you've got to sort of think about, though, is a hempcrete wall is usually going to be thicker than the sort of clad wall that you're replacing. So it's whether you increase the thickness on both sides or on the outside or the inside. Can your existing footings, are they strong enough to hold that hemp? Those sorts of things. So I would like to see a lot more retrofits. At the moment, there's been a few of them, been involved in some, but mostly sort of new houses. In terms of sort of the industry, the way I see it is that every time a hemp house is built, people come and see it when it's being built or visit it when it's finished, and they love it. And it's sort of like every house that's built, it's almost sort of generating sort of more people who want to live in a hemp house.
Yeah.
And so that's really great. But because it's only a relatively new product, we don't have a lot of builders out there who are experienced with it. We don't have a lot of installers. So it's kind of, we need to build the skill base as we sort of build the demand at the same time, because it's very difficult if people want a hemp house and they can't find a builder who'll work with it. That makes it very difficult. If we had some more hemp installers, so that people, if they sort of, got an ordinary standard sort of builder who sort of went not really keen to do hempcrete, they could get a subcontractor in to do that. So there are a few people out there doing it, but I would really like to see a lot more, because that would mean that builders without experience in hempcrete can take on a hempcrete job knowing that they can subcontract that out.
Yeah.
The other thing I would like to sort of see is, just more supply, and with greater supply would become greater competition in the market and bringing the prices down, because if it's price competitive with other building methodologies, but it gives you better insulation, better health, why would you not choose to do it?
Yeah, no, totally. So do you think we'll see a time where people can grow their own house? Because it takes about 16 weeks to grow a hemp crop?
Yeah, so 3 to 4 months. In terms of that, I think growing it is not really so much the issue, it's the processing. The hemp plant, the hemp fibre is very strong, and that's one of the reasons why it's valued, but it also makes harvesting and processing a little bit difficult. So this is why when I was talking about hemp processing, if we can have more hemp processing plants available, then people might be able to sort of grow their hemp and then, or arrange for it to be processed for them, and they can build their house with it. The other thing is, at the moment, is that for hempcrete houses, we use the hemp hurd, and that is the inside of the hemp stalk. Now, they started building with the hemp hurd because it was a waste product from the hemp fibre industry. So the hemp fibre is on the outside of the plant, and it was actually more valuable. But as yet in Australia, we don't actually have a market really for that outside fibre. I've been trying to talk as many people as I possibly can into the idea of making it into hemp fibre insulation bats, which they do in the United States and in Europe. And I feel like that would really make close the sort of gap in terms of what you can do with natural building materials. You could build your walls out of hempcrete, put your hemp insulation bats in the roof, and have this wonderful sort of low carbon natural house. But at the moment, the fact that there isn't a market for the actual sort of fibre makes it sort of less economically viable for farmers. So if we could use every single part of the plant, it's more useful. But I was also recently talking to someone about hemp crops being used and hempcrete, where the carbon is stored from that crop as carbon offsets. So they're getting certification for that. So that's going to be another incentive to build your house out of hemp.
Exciting. So yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of exciting things happening. I think they're not happening fast enough is the reality.
Yeah.
So
I've had a little bit of interest from some of the sort of more volume builders, like as the National Construction Code is bringing in accounting for carbon footprint, low embodied energy materials like hempcrete sort of are coming to the fore. So there's been a little bit of interest, but we haven't really seen that sort of uptake. What I would really like to sort of see is maybe someone on the block, building out of hempcrete. Not that that's the ideal sort of, but what I'm saying is we need to popularise this so that it becomes not so much a fringe material, but it becomes an ecological, healthy choice and a real choice that people can have when they're choosing to build.
Yep. No, totally. Yeah. It was funny. Just before COVID hit, I was being asked. We were trying to make a TV show. Someone was trying to make it. They were doing a couple of projects in Sydney with Michael Mobbs.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah, it was all just before COVID hit, and it didn't go ahead, which I feel is a bit disappointing. But what we were going to do with the TV show is go out and build sustainable houses and show people what they're all about and how they work and why it's so much more beneficial. To work with this sort of material and make it happen. So I think, so we really need to get it out there, because I think I look at this, there's a Facebook page called My Energy Efficient Home, and I see some really good advice on there, and everyone's like solar panels, batteries, my electric car, hot water system. It's like, you'll see the odd thing about double glazing windows, but I just don't see enough talk and chatter in all this stuff when building a house about the materials, like using natural materials. And from my experience, what I've had over the years, I just see how energy efficient a home can be that's built out of hemp or rammed earth. I've got a customer at the moment. He's actually a rammed earth builder. That's what he does for a profession. And we did his solar system and stuff like that. And it's amazing how energy efficient the place is. But he's actually just recently built, he reckons it's the most sustainable house he's ever built. Everything was milled and done from the property. The only thing they had to bring in, like, a heap of sand that just wasn't enough there, so they bring the sand in. But besides bringing the sand in, everything else was in the iron roof. But all the timber was milled on site and soil, and
Look, I would love to see sort of popular television sort of taking on something like that, or a challenge where the purpose is to actually make the most ecologically possible house and show how it's done and how realistically it's done. That this is not sort of some sort of hippie thing, that these are modern, healthy, comfortable houses that can look contemporary as well.
Yep, totally. And that's the biggest thing I've found. Like, I'm a pioneer in all this stuff. Like when we did this house, we couldn't do hemp, so we did magnesium oxide board.
Yep.
And it was the hardest thing in the world to find a gyprocker to come and work with it. No one wanted to touch it because they were all. Yeah, and even the guy that did do it, when he said it, that all cracked afterwards. So we need to, and he was like, I'm not going to guarantee it, warrant it all. And literally 2 weeks after he walked out the door, there's cracks in it everywhere. So, so it's really hard to find people that want to work with this sort of stuff. And I think most builders and I understand it, I run a business. If you do the same thing over and over again, it's more economical and, So, but yeah, that cookie cutter approach, I think, really needs to change in this industry.
In terms of that, and it's that lack of people being able to find people with experience in hempcrete building sort of led me and Jeremy Thomas to set up a web page, and it's called the Australian Hemp Building Directory. So people can look it up. It's hempbuilding.au. And basically what we're doing is we're listing builders, architects, building designers, installers, suppliers, certifiers, building inspectors, engineers, renderers. So looking at not just one sort of aspect of that building process, but everybody who's involved in it and who's had experience with hempcrete, so that people who are looking to build out of hempcrete have a basis they can go along and find people in their local area, find local supplies. If they're a builder who's gone out and done their first hempcrete house, once they've got some experience, they can list themselves on there and use that as advertising to generate more business. Yeah. So it's the idea behind it was to sort of try and help people who are interested in building with hempcrete to be easier to do so. And also, say a builder gets a client who sort of says, oh, look, I want someone wants to build a hempcrete house. Well, they can go online and find a designer, an engineer, an installer, and sort of say to that client, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, the industry's definitely come a long way. It was actually a week or two ago. I don't know if you know Madeline from Hardy Hemp
Certainly
Homes.
Do. I've worked on 2 projects with her.
There you go. Mads and I did our hemp course together.
Yep.
So I think it was like 9 years ago or something last week, that reminder you get on Facebook, the photo of me, and so doing a hemp build. So yeah, it's definitely come a long way since 9 years ago.
That's
definitely
great.
come a long way. So so it's exciting. So yeah, okay, cool. So is there anything else that you'd recommend if someone's looking to consider this material, what to look for? In
terms of hempcrete?
Yeah, building with hemp.
Oh, look, I'd just sort of say, just do it. and don't, this is the thing, don't let sort of, perhaps, difficulties ever stand in your way. There's so many people who are sort of pushing for this industry to do well. And if you're buying hemp that's been grown in Australia, you're supporting local farmers, and that sort of incentivizes them to grow more and support this sort of industry. So I would sort of say, if people sort of, a builder comes along and says, haven't worked with hemp before, the answer is, let's find an installer and subcontract that. Let's or a builder who hasn't done it before, go along to a hemp course, talk to other builders. A lot of the people who are in the industry are quite passionate about it and are prepared to sort of share their knowledge. With any sort of new material, a lot of people haven't had a lot of experience, but those who have, I've found, have been quite good at sharing that experience.
Yeah, I was pretty excited when I sold my pan mixer. The builder who brought it, he basically wants to get into hemp, and he brought that. I had a few spare bales of hemp curd laying around, and he took those, and he was just wanted to practice with it, learn, understand it, and he really wanted to start building with it. So
look, I had a Mitch, a young builder from Taree. He took on his first hempcrete house out at Wingham, which is, if people can look at it online, as the Simple Patch, and did a fantastic job of it, and now wants to build his own hemp house out of it.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's definitely an amazing material. So I'm looking forward to finishing my house and getting it done. So with hemp, there is, rather than hempcrete, there's other ways to use hemp in building. Like, can you explain some of those different alternatives?
Yeah, I talked before about using the hemp fibre for insulation bats. So at the moment, they are produced in the United States and in Europe, and it's unfortunate that the cost of sort of importing just doesn't really make it sort of viable in Australia. So if we had a market for that, a number of other products are things called hemp wood. So a little bit like they do sort of use bamboo to make sort of board products, hemp can also be used for that. I know there's been some research done at the University of Melbourne in terms of doing that. And so the technology's out there. There's been a lot of study on it. What we need is some investment, people who are sort of prepared to sort of put forward and sort of say, look, I can really see a future for this building product. And, build a plant to sort of produce it in Australia. Because if you think about this, if you've got wood, which takes 25 years to grow, or you've got hemp, which takes 3 to 4 months to grow, in terms of sort of being able to use a product, and then from a carbon sort of point of view, lock up that carbon quickly, then, I mean, it's an obvious sort of answer. So it would be great to sort of see some of those other products that are available overseas become available in Australia.
Yeah.
As well as the mixed on-site hempcrete, there's also a number of companies in Australia who are selling hemp blocks. At the moment, most of those have been imported from overseas, but I know that there are people who are developing and working on doing hemp blocks that are manufactured in Australia. So I'd say sort of watch this space, and hopefully soon we'll have Australian manufactured hemp blocks available.
Yeah, I've seen some prefabbed hemp walls.
Yes.
I had a temporary office here when I first got to Lismore. We made a prefabbed hemp wall, and I remember making it, putting it in. We made it where we weren't going to put it, thinking we're going to move it. We knocked it down because we couldn't move it. It was so heavy.
Look, in terms of that, most of the prefab companies, they'll install them with a crane. And that's just realistically how they need to be done. But so much of our building is actually tending toward prefab. It's great in terms of you can minimise wastage, you can have really high tolerances because things are built off-site in the factory. So in the UK, a number of the larger builds have been done using prefab panels. So the Marks and Spencer store, that's right, Marks and Spencer store they built in the UK at Cheshire Oaks using hempcrete. They did prefab panels. And for those sort of larger commercial builds, it just means that they can be installed much quicker. You can render them sort of almost straight away. And I think that there's a real future in Australia for prefab panels, and it's just going to be a matter of getting a manufacturing plant happening.
Yeah,
so
no, definitely.
I'd encourage someone out there with a factory to start.
And there's some really good investment opportunities from the New South Wales government. I know for us here that they will match, anyone that's building a manufacturing plant, they'll match dollar for dollar if you're going to build some sort of manufacturing plant. And I know there's some guys around Sawtell, Coffs Harbour. They're passive house designers, and what they're looking to do is build a manufacturing facility there in Coffs Harbour around Sawtell to actually do passive houses built at the factory there. So I'd love to see more stuff done with hemp. And
I'd love to encourage them to do hempcrete panels.
Totally. So we're working on a project at the moment, and we've got a really good project. It's high end, and we're going to do passive houses on it. And I've talked to the guys about using some more alternative materials, so we'll see where we get to. But I would love to build them out of hemp, so I'd be pretty damn excited if we went.
But in terms of the passive house, I feel like that hempcrete is a really obvious sort of answer to that, because at the moment with the passive house, the wall build-ups, they're great, but there's so many layers to them. There's the outside sort of your rain screen, that's sort of and then you've got your weather-tight layer underneath that, and then you've got your insulation. Somewhere in there's going to be a frame holding your house up. On the inside, you've got your air tightness barrier, and then you've got your wall finish. Yep. So there's all these sort of multiple layers. One of the benefits I see of hempcrete is that it's sort of a single skin wall, you've got your timber frame structure in the middle, but on the outside, the line render on the outside is your weather barrier, okay, and your rain screen as well. And on the inside, your internal render is your air tightness layer. So rather than have all these sort of multiple manufactured materials, you've got one sort of really sort of simple material that can actually do all those functions, and the walls are still vapor permeable.
Yeah.
And good insulation. So for me, it's just such an obvious choice.
No, totally. Yeah. It's even think like with the amount of materials and the manufacturing and the process and shipping all that stuff around and putting it together, like the embodied energy it takes to make a passive house compared to using natural materials like hemp or rammed earth or something like that. It's yeah, it takes a lot. There's a lot of embodied energy that we need to somehow capture and bring back. So
Yeah.
Yep. So pretty exciting. So yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, mate, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Look, I'd sort of say if people are sort of looking at building, a couple of things I'd sort of say would be, one, think carefully about things, learn as much as you can. There's some fabulous resources out there. Mike mentioned, My Efficient Electric Home, but in terms of design, the sort of government's put out the My Home website, and there's a book as well that has some absolutely fantastic sort of information, sort of understanding sort of a basis of how these sorts of things work. My other thing would be, if you're going to build well. In Australia, we have really large houses, and I think that what we're better off doing is building a slightly smaller house and using that budget to build better fabric in the building. So when I talk about building fabric, I mean your walls, windows, roof, all of those things which enclose your house, they are what sort of control that performance of your building. So in that respect, put your effort and money into doing those things really well and getting good design as well, and you'll have a great house.
Yeah, totally. And one thing I'll throw in there, like I just recently did my passive house designers course, and I learned so much out of it. But the one real thing I got out of it, I suppose, is the role of the passive house designer, or more the building certifier in the role. And I think it doesn't matter what you're building. I'd really highly recommend. There's a guy on YouTube. I'll put all Kirstie's links below, and I'll put this guy on YouTube. He goes around to traditional builds and he picks up all the defects. I'm addicted to watching this guy on YouTube. He's amazing. But it's one thing I'd highly recommend anyone building a house. And I actually just had this experience this morning. I had a builder. He's building a bathroom. I said to him, I don't want nothing to do with it. You just make it happen. The tilers rocked up today. We did the floor this week, and the tilers come and said, that's not the code. The bath needs to be in the corner. I can't put the shower screen here, blah, blah, blah. Builder's unhappy. He's angry on the phone. He's like, I'm going to pull that bloody bath out. And it's like, I told you I didn't want to be a part of this. So I suppose the point I'm making is have someone that knows everything that's going on. I think that's why the passive house certifiers are great, because they're involved in the process the whole way along, and a designer like yourself that is in the corner of the owner. Because one thing the tiler said to me this morning is like, mate, don't let him pull the wool over your eyes. The bath can't go there. It's against the standards. It needs to be moved. And the builder's like, it's fine, mate. Don't worry about it, Yeah.
I think you've hit on a really important sort of issue, and that is what is designed and what is actually built. And one of the great things about the passive house standard is, first of all, it's based on building science. And at the design phase, you feed all the information into a program called the Passive House Planning Package, and it will actually tell you how much heating and cooling you will require in your house. And if you want to be certified, you need to be below a certain limit, okay? And the wonderful thing is that at that design phase, you can actually see how your house is physically going to work. If you're overheating a bit too much, do you reduce the size of that western window? Do you put more shading on? But it actually, rather than just using sort of rules of thumb or sort of, assumptions about what's worked in the past, it actually uses building science to actually calculate how much heat are we going to get, how much heat are we going to lose through that window, and can really sort of tweak and appropriately size those sorts of things. The other thing is that with at the end of a passive house project, we talked about at the beginning, which is the blower door test. So if your builder knows that at the end of this process, their air tightness is going to be checked and needs to reach a certain limit, then everyone is going to be really conscious of that. Yeah. And it also just sort of raises that consciousness of focusing on doing things well during the whole build, making sure that when insulation is installed that there aren't huge gaps, making sure that things are actually sort of done properly and attention is paid to those sort of details. So that's one of the great things about choosing to do passive house.
Totally. And I think, just having that person, if you're going to build, having, that third party that's independent of the builder to check their work and make sure things are done properly. Because I've literally, so many things in my house were done wrong, not done to code, done to spec when we build it. Hope no one that ever buys my house watches this. But it was disappointing because there's so many little things. I'm like, I noticed the energy, the leaks and things that weren't done airtight. And I've got some examples of we had a whole heap of double glazing windows, bifolds, and I said to the builder, I saw like this 50 mil gap. I said, how are you going to seal that? Saying, I'm going to use air seal tape. Great. I got home, the trim was on, done, great, all good. Months later, there was a gap in the architrave, and I could see the sunlight. And I was like, you didn't tape that bloody window up, you know? So having someone that can be there and double check the builder and make sure they do their job, because they just don't. And I know what I'm like. And but yeah, so it's not fun. So I'd highly recommend get a third party in your corner to help you out. So, all right, cool. Well, mate, yeah, thank you. Really appreciate having this chat. So we'll put all your links and everything in the description and below. And so for the Off Grid Tribe podcast, if anyone wants to ask questions, you can actually ask questions on the podcast there, and Kirstie will be able to reply and have a conversation.
Okay.
And go from there. So, mate, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
See you, mate.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and found this content inspiring and informative. Make sure to subscribe to stay updated. Drop your comments below. And don't forget to like this content and share it around. Head to the offgridtribe.com to keep the conversation going. Together, let's embrace the power of sustainable living.